Hey, what's up, you guys? My name is Mitko Karshovski, and welcome to episode 92 of That Remote Life podcast, where we hear from location-independent entrepreneurs and professionals so you can learn to quit the cubicle and live life on your terms. Today's episode is another deep dive Thursday, during which I get to go down a rabbit hole on a specific topic related to the digital nomad lifestyle. Sometimes I do that by myself, and sometimes I'm joined by a guest, usually someone who has been on the podcast in the past. And today I'm joined by my friend Joe Anderton, who was one of my very first guests on this podcast way back on episode 7. And in that interview, we discussed how he built his social media and branding agency, The Wonder & Co., which works with top CPG or consumer packaged goods brands. And you can check out that interview at thatremotelife.com/episode 7. During today's interview, however, Joe and I got to basically cover all of my favorite hits in terms of topics. We talked about the 2020 presidential election in the US and what the result means for digital nomads, how small countries are capitalizing on the remote work trend, how non-remote businesses are reacting to a forced shift to remote work due to COVID, and how that's going to affect the next decade, plus much, much more. This interview, guys, without a doubt goes down as one of my favorites in the history of this podcast. So I think you are really going to enjoy it as well. But before we jump into the episode, I would greatly appreciate it if you could take a second and leave a review. I've made the process very easy for you. All you have to do is head over to ratethispodcast.com/TRL and write your review. It's literally that easy. Just go to that URL and you're going to be able to type in your review. If you're enjoying this podcast, leaving a review is one of the best ways to support us. Reviews are a key statistic that Apple looks at in order to determine how to rank a podcast. So your review will directly help us climb the rank boards and attract new listeners. So thank you in advance for leaving a review if you choose to do so. If you want to check out the full show notes and a list of resources mentioned on this episode, you can do so over at thatremotelife.com/episode 92. That's episode all spelled out, followed by the number 92. All right, you guys, without further ado, let's dive into this deep dive Thursday conversation with Joe Anderton. All right, Joe, welcome back to the show, man. It's been a while since you've been here. I think you were actually episode number 7. So, a little while ago. How you doing?
Very good. How are you? Thanks for having me on again.
Yeah, dude, of course. It's such a pleasure. You and I have talked quite a bit back and forth just to lay a little bit of the ground for people knowing what we're going to be talking about here. But you and I have been talking quite a bit back and forth on Instagram recently just about, the future of work and how COVID and a lot of the developments in the world right now are really setting the stage for what you and I believe is going to be really the future of work in business. And so, we were talking back and forth on Instagram, and I was like, dude, let's talk about this with, and record it, because I think a lot of people are going to be interested to hear, your opinions and that kind of stuff. But before we kind of dive into that, we were just talking before we hit record, and I actually stopped you in the middle of the conversation and said, let's hit record because I think this is interesting. Currently, so that people know when we're recording this, it is Thursday, November 5th. And the election here in the United States is still raging. It likely seems like it might be raging for a little bit longer. But you had an interesting comment when you said that you feel like, obviously some entrepreneurs are being vilified a little bit, like Jeff Bezos, for example, and that you feel that is kind of being attached to the types of entrepreneurs that you, myself, and a lot of the people listening as well. Did I communicate that correctly? Do you feel that way? Why do you feel that way? Just curious.
I mean, it's a very complex topic, obviously, but I do find there to be a tremendous amount of sentiment, particularly on social media channels, where there's a an anti-capitalist movement, right? There's individuals who don't believe in capitalism in the free market. I think that is being driven by billionaires and multi-billionaire entrepreneurs such as Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg for obvious reasons. And I think people like you and myself who are capitalistic and entrepreneurial still understand why individuals are upset with those individuals. I'm personally upset with some of those individuals that I mentioned because of their handling of not only COVID, but the way in which they treat workers and the way in which they put profits ahead of the well-being of our nation or of the globe. I do think to some degree, though, because the sentiment against the sentiment against capitalism is starting to affect how people view smaller entrepreneurs and solopreneurs and small businesses. You kind of all get thrown into a similar category, even though it couldn't be more different. So yeah, I do, but I think it's a subject you have to kind of talk about carefully because obviously we're not even close to being in the same category as those names we just threw out or those businesses we just throw out. We're not even.
I think very few people are. Yeah.
Exactly. But I do believe in capitalism. I do believe in a free market. I think that, we have to change our culture as a whole of how we approach business and ideas and, what are the consequences of these big ideas and how do they affect our globe from the very low level, your everyday citizen to, the highest, most richest people on earth. There needs to be a much bigger evaluation of cause and effect.
Well, and that's the reason why, to me, that's kind of surprising. And I personally, for example, haven't experienced anybody like giving me any like negative like feelings of because I'm an entrepreneur. But I think that it's interesting because like literally what I wanted to talk to you about is that, in my opinion, entrepreneurship is something that a lot of people who are currently employees are going to have to learn as a skill because the trend of work is going in this direction of, freelancing, solopreneurship. Like I call it micropreneurship, where like you're a solopreneur, but perhaps have like one or two, three freelancers that are helping you deliver your service. And, I don't know how familiar you are with Naval Ravikant. People who are listening probably know that that's somebody who I talk a lot about because I think he really has his finger on the pulse of what's going to happen. But he talks about the fact that the internet creates one massive leader in a niche and a long tail of small niche competitors, right? So you have an Amazon that kind of dominates the e-commerce field, and then you have a long tail of small brands that serve a very niche audience, which you kind of, I'm sure, understand because you kind of deal with a lot of that. And I think that that's going to be happening in everything. So it won't be just Amazon, but a lot of people are just going to end up becoming their own small brands, selling very niche products or very niche services. And people who are listening to this right now who might be employees, as automation and all of these things are on the rise, like you may need to develop some of these entrepreneurial skills.
Absolutely. I think that you don't need to because there'll always be, I believe, work. But if you want to prosper, you will need to learn to continually recycle skills and stay on top of trends and always be able to learn new things. I think that's the skill of the future because if you think about it, I started my business because social media existed. Because I would have never been able to build my brand. I would have never been able to get clients or any of that if I didn't have access to Facebook and Instagram. To your point with Amazon, there's probably multi-thousands of people that entire business model is built off of being a vendor for Amazon.
Like
and
FBA, for sale by Amazon.
Exactly. And the same can be said about multiple platforms, which is great. So that's the positive side of things. I think from a skill set standpoint, the traditional method of going to university or higher education to learn, for instance, marketing because there's plenty of fields where higher education still is applicable. But to learn marketing in college, I will say this is probably going to be kind of controversial, but is a huge waste of money.
Oh, 100%.
You are literally burning money because the way in which marketing trends are evolving, the education system cannot keep up with that pace. So you will learn outdated methods. That kind of goes into what we're discussing right now, is how you will need to learn to be entrepreneurial, in the sense that you will need to continuously maintain your education to learn the new trends as they emerge in order to be successful. For you and I, that may mean continuously listening to podcasts, reading new materials that are being generated in real time, whether that be YouTube videos, blogs, following individuals online that are very influential, and to be able to absorb that information in real time and act upon it. What something I do as an entrepreneur, as an agency owner, is as new trends emerge in the marketing field, I learn them as quick as I can. I bring people in that understand them, and I discuss those with my clients. I say, hey, this is an emerging trend. This is what the brand leaders, the thought leaders in our industry are doing right now. We have to do that. And now nobody's going to be able to tell you or teach you how to do that quick enough in order to implement it. By the time you get to learning that from let's say a 10-week course or something like that, you may be late to the party. You may have lost that client. They may have already found another agency that could fill that gap for them. So yes, the most successful individuals are going to be those that can learn to be entrepreneurial, because that is the skill. You essentially, you have to wear multiple hats at multiple times, understand multiple skills, and constantly be willing to learn. And that's something that you can't really teach in higher education. That's something that you learn through habit, through the voices of others. And I know you and I are probably someone in this sense, like Tim Ferriss. He's the first person I read that really said these things to me, and this was probably 10 years ago, where it's like, you need to do X, Y, and Z on your own in order to generate multiple revenue streams, in order to continuously innovate and be successful. COVID has just been the catalyst to that now. We're going to see that exponentially grow in need. And I know these are things that Andrew Yang has been discussing frequently on different podcasts that he's been on, where the need for entrepreneurial skills is going to become greater. And, this pandemic is just going to expedite how quickly individuals are going to have to adapt.
Yeah, and I think this is something that I've talked about with like family members and friends of mine as well, is like it's the entrepreneurial skills, but also the understanding that and I actually I think I tweeted this recently, is like, it's very likely that if you're listening to this right now, what you'll be doing in 10 years does not exist.
Mm-hmm.
Like that job, that position, possibly that industry does not exist. Because, for example, like when I was in college, Instagram wasn't a thing. I mean, it was there, it was a thing, but it's not what it is now. And I also work in marketing like you do, or at least generate a majority of my income that way. And a lot of the things that we're doing weren't even a thing that I would have even been taught in school, right? So these fields that you might be working in don't even exist. So you need to realize, and I think this is going to be really difficult for some people that maybe have the mindset of I'm going to college, or I'm learning this trade right now, and then I'm done learning and I'm just going to cruise from there on out. If you have that mindset and you're listening to this, that is a very scary place to be, because it's very likely that that will not be the case. And you're going to have to be constantly rediscovering a career path, rediscovering new areas to work in, especially as automation and AI just continues just cut away entire industries, But you mentioned COVID, and you mentioned kind of politics a little bit, and that is something that I want to touch on. Like I said, it is currently November 5th. The election in the US is currently still raging. At the moment, Biden is leading. That could totally change. Who knows what could happen? But, and this is kind of what the internet is filled with at the moment, and I'm sure that it still will be filled with by the time this comes out. But the interesting thing that isn't being talked about is how that, this election could change life for digital nomads. And one of the immediate one is our ability to travel. So COVID completely destroyed the American passport standing as one of the best passports to have to get into countries. And the hope has been that at some point the US will get it under control and it will, the American passport status will return to what it once was. The terrifying thing to me a few weeks ago was that it seemed like, and we're not going to go deep into politics or anything like that, but President Trump essentially came out and it seemed like he kind of waved the white flag. He said that it was over, that COVID wasn't a thing anymore. And I just immediately thought like, oh boy, we're going to be here for a while, because if we didn't ramp up kind of COVID handling, that could go south. What do you think happens potentially to COVID handling, to the return of the American passport, those sort of things, if Biden does win? And this could all sound really ridiculous in a week if that doesn't happen, but I'm just curious.
Well, I do think that a Biden win would help the standing of the American passport, as it would help the reputation of our country globally. I mean, I think it's pretty clear that, the majority of the world views the handling of COVID from Donald Trump as being, negative.
Right.
Obviously, our passports have been, I think we had like the
Just
top
decimated.
We've been decimated with those, and it kills people like us, because I mean, we had a whole trip planned for the whole year before COVID hit. So I do think it would help the passport, but it's a complex issue because obviously it comes with other things, because I think that Joe Biden and the Democratic Party, they don't really foresee things going back to normal as far as travel and leisure anytime soon. I mean, I've heard things end of 2022, 2024, before things return to normal, and then our passports are going to allow us leisure travel, a non-essential travel. But even Europe, as it stands, is getting hit pretty hard again with the wave of COVID as well. So it's really hard to predict, whether or not the winner of this election will genuinely put us in a better position as far as travel and our passport. But I do think, the sentiment around a Biden win globally would be beneficial for that, for sure.
I also wonder, because this is something that like I've talked about a lot, both publicly and privately, is you need to, if you don't have a passport, which the number of American citizens who do not have a passport is staggeringly scary. So you need to have a passport. If you're an American, you should have an American passport, but also like investing in developing secondary passports. Because, for example, I hold dual citizenship with the United States and Bulgaria. And at the moment, even though, as an American citizen, I'm not really allowed into the European Union. If I wanted to, I could go back to Europe right now because I hold that citizenship. And I'm curious, that hasn't been as available to a lot of people, because like, how are you going to get that second citizenship unless you're Ballin and Bezos, like we talked about. But with COVID coming in and forcing a lot of companies to move to remote work, those remote workers seeing the benefit of that, and the companies seeing the benefits to their bottom line as well of, hey, we don't have to pay for that office, all of those things. Does that open up the possibility for now all of these regular citizens, regular workers realizing that like, hey, I can go overseas and get a passport in Mexico because I really, really like Mexico. And that gives you like, do you think that might be something that could be on the horizon in the next 5 years? It's almost this like influx of dual citizenship owners and global citizens, as we might call them.
I think in the short term, yes, myself included. Like, I'm already exploring ways that I can get an Italian passport via, my lineage.
Ancestry.
I've talked to a lot of individuals that would have never even considered getting dual citizenship, and I think they want to explore that now. But really where this goes is like, and as you know, one of the biggest issues with being a digital nomad has always been, I have to leave. I only got 3 months, or I only have 90 days. I mean, I only have 180 days.
Right.
That type of mentality is tough. Like I would personally love to live in Europe for a few years, for instance, and really experience Paris and experience Berlin, and in a real genuine way, not just 1 month or
Right.
whatnot. Make friends and get
Not
into
go to the
community.
Louvre. Yeah.
Exactly. So, I think that what's going to happen by nature is as people have more access to working remote, the 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 average person is going to be able to become a quote unquote, location independent digital nomad. And as that number rises, there's going to be a much greater demand to for countries to allow individuals to spend more time in their country because they already have a steady income. They're not taking jobs away from local citizens, and they're actually going to bring value, to
Mm-hmm.
that community, whether that be via just contributing to the economy or to, bringing whatever skill set you have to that area. So I just think that, obviously that takes time, and governments are very, very slow to get things done. And that's why I don't necessarily think we should give all this, you know, I don't know, power and access to the government, because they take forever to get these things done and they don't put precedence on them. But in the future, I do believe, and I know there's already some like digital nomad, location independent visas and different things happening, that's going to increase. Because,
Mm-hmm.
like I said, one of the biggest things was when you and I decided to become location independent, we had to do it the entrepreneurial way, meaning we had to essentially quit our job, lose our income, and jump off into the abyss, like, and jumping off a cliff, and then like hopefully we could build our wings on the way down, maybe, like, and make enough income that we could make it work. Now with COVID, average person with an average office job is going to be allotted the opportunity, if they're responsible enough, to live abroad or just independently travel while maintaining their original job with their original
Mm-hmm.
salary. That is going to open up doors globally. And I think the conversation will be had that, people should be more global citizens, in the sense that they should be able to move around more freely, not be so restricted if they bring income and they have stability on their side. So I do think that that's going to change massively. But in the short term, yes, people are going to seek out multiple passports for sure, in droves, in order to do those things. And I think that's beneficial for the world. I think travel is very beneficial for the mindset of the world.
And it's also interesting, like you mentioned, there's a lot of these new digital nomad visas coming around, and it's going to take some countries a really long time to like come up with solutions for that. But the interesting thing is that just like large corporations are being outmaneuvered by small, nimble startups, we're already seeing that very similar trend working with governments, where you have giant governments that are taking a very long time to think about this, to then very small governments like a Georgia, like an Estonia, like
Mm-hmm.
a Barbados, that is coming up with solutions much quicker because they see like, hey, there's this niche population here that has a lot to offer. Why don't we just very quickly come up with a solution for them? And I think like the Georgia solution, I think they have been perhaps one of the most successful countries in developing this, because not only have they made it easy for people to go there, but they've also essentially created infrastructure around the digital nomads that go there. Like they have a free co-working program there in Tbilisi. And I think this as our population, if I can say that, as our population as a community grows, the bigger and bigger countries are going to start coming up with solutions because it's going to matter to them.
Absolutely. Yep. And you're 100% right. And it has to start somewhere. And to your point, a smaller government is the right place. And also they understand the benefits. It's putting themselves on the map. It's bringing in more traffic. It's bringing in individuals with income to spend in the
Mm-hmm.
local community. Obviously, the bigger governments will follow suit. But like I said, they take a lot of time to make these things happen. Unfortunately, it could be 5 years before,
Yeah.
we start seeing that stuff.
Well, and I'm curious to kind of see if you've been seeing the same thing I've been seeing. But the interesting thing is that I feel like it seems like over the last year or maybe the last 2 years, there have been a lot of services that have been popping up to serve. Like for the first time, I feel like there's like services around us that are trying to like support our life. Like for example, global, like for us Americans, like healthcare that is actually global. Now there's not a ton of options, but there's a few. Recently I did a whole, a two-part interview essentially with Radim Rezek and Dave Williams, who are really trying to expand the midterm rental market so that we don't have to choose between, am I renting this Airbnb for 3 weeks or am I renting a long-term apartment rental?
Yep.
Do you think is that something that's just me and I'm kind of seeing this mirage of these things popping up, or have you had a similar kind of experience?
I'm seeing them in limited fashion. I wish there was far more of that because those
Yeah.
are pain points that I've dealt with for a long time. And as much as I love like an Airbnb, for instance, you know, there's not a real good solution. The fees are incredible. You got to pay in advance. I mean, not everybody has that luxury. You
Hmm.
can't book 3 or 4 months out unless you want to put up, I don't know, six, ten
Tons and tons
grand.
of money. Yeah.
Yeah. So there needs to be better solutions for that. I'm seeing some of that happening. Obviously, it's in the the early stages. Same with healthcare. I mean, that's a big one, right? I mean, how people get travel insurance, but it only covers certain things. It's fine print everywhere. You pay for these services. You have health care in the States. It doesn't apply to you out of the country. I mean, it's difficult for us, those that really choose to be location independent, to get those things done. As that community grows, the demand grows and then the solutions will grow. So that's what's
Hmm.
promising to me. And I've been speaking on this for years. And again, things just take so much time. So I don't expect this to come out and happen immediately. But as long as it's happening at a pace like this, I'm happy with it. So it's not just you, I'm seeing it too. And I'm excited about it, to be honest.
The other interesting thing, like I just had somebody send me a link to, and this is like a crazy like crashing of the worlds. But a family friend, sent me this link about this Bulgarian entrepreneur who got stuck in Tanzania during COVID and just hasn't been able to leave. But he luckily got stuck in Zanzibar, which is this beautiful island off the coast of Tanzania. And he had to figure out how to run his business off of Zanzibar. And he was just like, hey, this is a great spot, and bought a shit ton of land and is now developing a co-working and co-living like village in Zanzibar, because he was like, this is sweet. Like we got Wi-Fi. It's relatively cheap to live here. So I think like also like these little um like not just services like healthcare, and the other big one that we haven't mentioned yet is global Wi-Fi. There's a few different companies like SpaceX that are developing global Wi-Fi, which is going to be a huge solution. But I also think there's going to be lots of these different little things that you're going to be almost able to like niche experiences that are still, like, hey, come work in Zanzibar for 3 months, like Bonsko is another one. Hey, come work here and ski for the winter, or whatever. So I think that those are also sort of developing. But I want to ask you, because you do work with quite a bit of clients who are not specifically like location independent businesses. You work with some traditional sort of businesses. And has there been any sort of input from them about them being forced to work remotely? Obviously, we can speculate on what people think, but like you have actually talked with clients. What does it seem like those people are thinking with this whole new remote work thing being put on them?
Yes. I mean, I have a lot of experience here and I've got a decent amount of feedback from clients, both on like the brand manager side and also, um, you know, VPs and hiring managers. So I think from a hiring manager's standpoint, this has been somewhat of a blessing in disguise because the traditional route for hiring within marketing has been you seek out someone local to your office. So, obviously, if your offices are in New York City or LA, you have a large talent field there. If you have offices somewhere else in the country, your talent field is probably going to be minimized. a lot of brands and businesses that were opposed to hiring remote workers post COVID have changed their thought process. They're far more willing to hire people outside of their local area to fill the role should they have, qualifications to do so. That is only going to improve the overall team that they can put together on for their brands, whether that be sales or marketing. So what I've seen from the hiring managers is a lot of optimism, because as they transition their workers to work from home, they're not seeing much of a dip in productivity. If anything, they're seeing somewhat of a, something in the middle maybe, but again, like they feel like they can run their team remotely quite effectively. So they're pushing outwards to find new talent. That's positive. A negative to it that I've seen and I can personally attest to this, I'm sure you can as well, is that while remote work is beneficial, this is a tough time to transition to working from home. And myself, I work, I don't have children, right? I mean, I don't have certain challenges that others face. So what I've got a lot from the client side is that, it's been a struggle to balance work life, and it's been a struggle to work from home when you do not have the ability to find outlets outside of your work. You feel like you are living at work now. So although the flexibility of working from home and being remote is there, the trade-off is that you're now, your office is your kitchen, or your office is your living room in some instances. Your kids may be there with you, and that's difficult as well. So although you have more time with your family, more time at home, that's a challenge that we all face. I think you and I, as people that have worked for ourselves and worked location independent for a long time, have found ways around that, or found ways to cope with that. Like, whether that be, hey, I've spent all week inside, working from the same place that I sleep, but I have this planned. I have this weekend getaway where I'm going to do X. I'm going to work from a coffee shop today. I'm going to, go to this museum after work on this day, or I'm going to meet with the local and grab some beers and talk. I mean, those trade-offs are what life's all about. You do X to get X, and then you have to have outlets on the side. So I think there's an immediate issue, which is trying to deal with work-life balance and working from home. There's an immediate opportunity for brands to expand their teams and to understand that we do not need to have everybody in the office every day of the week in order to be successful. We do not need to micromanage our employees every single second of the day. They can be productive on their own. So there's so much positive mixed with so much negative. I think that that's what happens when forced change comes upon us on such a massive scale. So what we're dealing with is just like, a major change, a major shift in the way we work, the way we hire, the way we think, happening all at once during a pandemic. So of course that's going to be difficult and exciting for a variety of people. There's different things happening. So I just think it's, there's going to have to be a lot of conversations around how this transition sticks moving forward, post-COVID and things like that. How we learn to work, to have a work-life balance that's more, mentally, it's a challenge that we can face and that we can thrive, because I think that in the end we can thrive from this. We can spend more time with our families. We can be more productive. We can have more flexible schedules. We can let life become a balance between enjoyment and obligation. And I think that's what our country's missing right now. I think that so many of us are so hyper-focused on work and our lives being surrounded by work and accumulating money that we are really neglecting some of the more important things. And that's another reason why I'm somewhat excited about AI, and I'm somewhat excited about, giving people the opportunity to focus on, non-revenue generating activity, because I think that that's important to our society as a whole, as we think about, where we're going as a country. So I don't know, there's a lot going on at once, but the overall sentiment, like I had said, is that it's a positive direction that's, has plenty of challenges ahead that we have to face. So that's really where we're at.
Yeah, I think like I've said this before. I feel like regular when people go to an office and stuff like that, they're essentially like working to like they're living to work. Do you know what I mean? Like everything is surrounded by that. I have to live here because that's where my work is. I need to drive, 2 hours every day because like I need to get to work and whatever. And then what little time is left is like I need to rest because tomorrow I'm gonna get crushed at work again. While remote work allows you to almost like work to live, right? Like it's almost like flip, like you get the work done that you need to get done, and then you have literally without any sort of buffer, you can enjoy your life. The living is sort of the focus of it. But I also, when you were talking, I think you touched on something really important, which is you mentioned like the micromanagement. And that's another thing that I've talked about with friends of mine who have had to transition to working remotely. And I asked them like, okay, so you don't work in an office anymore, you're working remotely. How has that changed the way that you're being managed? And almost all of them has said that as other than like, their conversation moving to Slack, there hasn't really been a change in management. And I think that that's actually an issue where a lot of companies are taking a shortcut and they're not really changing the way that they're managing their employees because they think that this is going to end soon and that they're going to go back to the office. But if you're going to continue working remotely, from now on, like companies need to adopt different ways of managing their employees and managing projects because the way things are done in an office long term don't work in the way, when working remotely. Have you had any companies or any clients that you've had to kind of like who've been like asking you about these things, or do you have a similar observation?
I have a similar observation. I don't have any firsthand experience with this, but essentially what I've seen and read is that I know a lot of the tech companies are looking at hiring a position that's essentially, I don't want to say HR, but it's a position that looks to monitor the management and relationships of employees working remotely, like a whole entire thing.
That's interesting.
It's different, right? Like it's completely different, like you said. I think that some brands will try to go back, some businesses will try to go back to the office. I really do believe that. I
Yeah.
think that's part of the free market. People will make decisions. Those that don't make that decision and decide to let their employees continue working remotely and build in different structures that work to make that successful for the business and for the employees and for bottom line, that those companies will be most successful because they'll be the most appealing to work for. So there's going to be a shift there as well, where you're going to have to operate your business differently in order to make sure that these managers are appropriately managing these employees. And then you're going to have to implement different systems and different softwares like Slack that allow your team to work together well online. These are things that these companies never even thought of.
Mm-hmm.
Personally speaking, the way we've always worked with our business is that every single person that works with us or for us, freelancers, etc., they have their set of things that they need to get done. They have their deadlines, they have their schedule and obligations. I do not ask them what they do with their day, ever. I will never call them on a Monday and say, "Where are you right now?" It's never like that. So what we've learned to how to manage people is to find people that are responsible, find people that like to work as a team, treat them equally, allow them to live their lives, give them deadlines and hold them accountable for the work that they need to get done. But micromanaging in the digital world, in the location independent world, is a huge mistake because what you're
Mm-hmm.
going to do is you're going to have people working from home that are constantly feeling anxiety, that are constantly feeling watched. Brands, businesses monitoring your online activity when you're logged in for work. And, as when you're working, once in a while, you're going to be distracted. You're going to look at your phone. You're going to look at your Facebook, Instagram feed, or Twitter feed. You're going to look at the news. I mean, that's just life. Individuals will have to learn how to multitask and to manage their workflow. And managers will have to do the same. And I think that will start, you'll start to see that happening with the forward thinking companies first, where they start to hire out managers that look to oversee and streamline the operations of remote work for their employees. That's going to be a fun shift to watch happen. And like I said, the talent field will follow. They're going to want to work for companies that are ahead of the trends.
Yep.
And working to find solutions to remote work rather than working to get their people in the office as fast as they possibly can.
Yeah, I had a friend who was telling me that her company was not only taking screenshots of what was on her screen while she was in work hours, but if she didn't move her mouse every minute, like, or something, they would dock her pay. And I was just
Yeah.
like, what? Like, that is insane and so not like that's just like a recipe for disaster if this like lasts longer and they don't get to go into the office like immediately. So that blew my mind. But I gotta ask, sort of, we're running out of time here a little bit, and I know you're plenty busy, but if we, kind of fast forward and look forward 5 years, where do you think we are as a community? What do you think has happened? What are some of the developments that you expect are going to be there in 5 years?
Like I said, things take time. I think 5 years is a difficult prediction. I don't want to be way off basis, but I'd say
No, you gotta put it down here in ink, and if it doesn't come true, we're gonna come after you.
one of the biggest things I see, I want to touch on this, is definitely so number one, there's going to be a big shift in where people live. So that's already happening.
Yeah.
People are going to move to the middle of the country. They're going to find cheaper homes. They're going to, make towns that have been on the decline for decades make huge comebacks. And
Yep.
you're going to see a revitalization of the middle of the country because people are not going to pay premiums to live in cities when they can work remotely. Two, people are going to start to work remotely and they're going to remain working remotely for the foreseeable future, unless their presence is needed, which will always be the case. But in masses, the individuals are going to remain working from home. That's 100% not going to change at all. AI is going to start to take jobs away from people and income away from people. So that's something that's going to happen as well. UBI will be a thing. People will be paid equally, whether it be $1,000 a month or a couple $1,000s a month, no matter what, to kind of offset that challenge and to allow people to follow endeavors that are not so much related to making dollars, but making a positive impact on the world. The biggest prediction that I have is, this is more of this is what we need to do versus this is what's going to happen, but we need to shift away from profit. We need to shift away, especially the larger corporations, need to shift away from putting profit ahead of everything else. Because what I'm seeing, especially as AI starts to populate more and more and how tech becomes so relevant, they don't need as many people to make a lot of money. That's not really what matters. So they're able to really cut their costs and optimize their business to make money. For instance, Facebook. Facebook used to be a company that was born to allow regular people to share their opinions, to connect. It was really came from a great place of intention. It developed into an advertising platform that was completely made on the basis of how can we generate the most profits by taking as much user data as possible, selling it to companies so that they could reach consumers. And by doing that, they destroyed the product itself and have actually endangered people's safety across the globe. So making business decisions that are based on profit versus being based on purpose. So that's the shift that our country and the globe is going to need to make when it comes to business, because as much as I love capitalism and the free market, our culture around why we work is going in the wrong direction. So that being said, incentivizing individuals to get back into the arts, to be able to pursue painting, sculpting, photography, writing, to get back into culture, to do to create brands and businesses that are going to, end climate change, that are going to end some of the biggest issues that we're facing in this world, like wealth sharing and opportunities not being given equally to people across the globe. So, we need to change. Like, our culture needs to change. What we value needs to change. How we look at people. Just because someone made $1 billion doesn't necessarily mean that they're a great person. So I think that this shift from COVID could be a blessing in disguise, in the sense that we're going to realize the wealth disparity has gotten out of control, that opportunity to essentially follow the path of the American dream, to work hard and to grow and to make something of yourself, is increasingly going away, and that the objective of just plainly making profits and money is not enough to progress our country any further and to progress the globe. So until we make that shift as to why we work, which I think will come out of this shift between working from home, AI taking jobs away, UBI, those three things kind of mixed in will expedite the process of people looking at work, their workload, and what they do with their time differently. And they start to apply their time, their work, and their talents into fields and into directions that are mutually beneficial for all walks of life, and not just the few that are benefiting right now. So those are some big predictions, but that's really where I see things going.
Yeah, I think I agree with you about UBI, because like from my point of view, I also think it's going to be just like unavoidable with how much like artificial intelligence is going to take away from like certain jobs that are right now. Like, I mean, like truck drivers, like that is, very soon probably going to have a decrease in the number of people working as truck drivers. But I think what that gives people is the time to figure things out, because it's not so easy to just go to college, graduate, go get a job. If you're going to go into an entrepreneurial field where you're going to have to kind of like figure things out, maybe have a period where you're like, hey, I don't really know what's going on. I got to figure this out. It's not really working. Having UBI will give you that ability to sort of keep yourself afloat while you figure things out. So I totally agree with that. But Joe, thank you so much, man, for coming on. I appreciate it. It was a lot of fun chatting with you. Like I said, you were back last time you were on the show was episode 7. So if anybody wants to kind of hear more about you and your journey in your business, feel free to go and listen there. But if anybody's interested in following you or anything like that, where can people find out more about your business, and where can they find you on social?
Yeah, so I'm the co-founder of The Wandering Co. So thewandering.co. We're on Instagram, The Wandering Co. My personal Instagram is Joe M. Anderton. And then I just wanted to give a little shout out to a company that I think is really cool. It's Moss Workspace on Instagram. I think it's going to be a tool that, creatives, it's going to revolutionize the way creatives work remotely. So I'd like to give that a little plug. Maybe, everybody listening can give that a check out, and maybe even test out our prototype. So that's just a couple things I wanted to mention. But as always, thank you for having me on. Hopefully you'll have me back again so we can keep this conversation going. And hopefully it doesn't take 5 years.
No, I'm gonna put a link in the show notes for anybody who wants to check out Moss. I got to see a little preview, and it does look awesome. I totally agree with you. I think for creative teams, it's gonna be a big game changer. So thanks, man. Yeah, I'd love to have you back on the show. Maybe next time we can have a beer and like do it in person. That'd be dope. But that would have to be after COVID. But thanks so much, brother. I really appreciate you.
All right. Thanks so much, man.